This is Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz with Sermons for Snowbirds, the first one of the year for 5775, and we're going to be talking about Chanukah. And I'm going to start with a bit of a riddle in the Talmud. Now, most of us are familiar with lighting the menorah, where we light one candle the first night, and 2 candles the second night, and 3 candles the third night, and so on and so forth until we have 8 candles on the 8th night. And that's an opinion that's recorded in the Talmud. It's the opinion of Beit Hillel. But what is fascinating is that there is another opinion as well, the opinion of Beit Shammai. And Beit Shammai's opinion is perplexing. He says you light 8 candles the first night, and you diminish a candle each night until you're only at 1 candle the last night of Chanukah. And really, for the last 2,000 years, rabbis have been scratching their head to understand why Beit Shammai counts backwards. And I'd like to offer an answer in 2 parts. First, I'd like to point out that even today we sometimes count backwards. We count backwards when there's a countdown, where you're counting to a new beginning, not to the culmination and the graduation and the end of an era, but actually the beginning of a new era. And so you count down before you're about to launch a rocket ship. And that's what NASA does. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, blast off. If you're in school and you don't like school that much, you count down days until vacation begins, because you're counting down to the thing that you actually want. When you're counting upwards, you're reflecting on the fact that you're concluding a chapter. When you're counting downwards, you're actually reflecting on the fact that you're beginning a new chapter, that you're blasting off, that you're starting something new. Now, there's another question that needs to be answered before I come back to Beit Shammai's point of view of counting down rather than counting up. And this is a question that's already asked by the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah on Daf Yud Chet Amud Bet. The Talmud, in its own way, asks a question that should perplex us all. Why is it that we still continue to celebrate Chanukah? Chanukah was about the Hasmoneans recapturing Israel, regaining sovereignty, and rededicating the temple. Once the Jews were sent into exile by the Romans, both of those disappeared, and Chanukah should have disappeared as well. And that's precisely the question the Talmud asks. And the Talmud kind of answers by saying, well, it's an answer with a shrug. Jews do it, so we continued with Chanukah. That's the Talmud's answer. I'd like to suggest that Beit Shammai felt they had a better answer. And let me explain the better answer. To Beit Shammai, Chanukah was a countdown to a new Jewish character, to the point in time when the Jews could consider themselves to be the comeback kids of history. And let me explain the context. The Jews achieved sovereignty in the land, and that sovereignty became most profound under the reign of Solomon. And when Solomon was king, the Jews were a major power. And then, of course, unfortunately, the kingdom split. And then finally, the Jews were sent into exile in 586 BCE to the Babylonian exile. Now, what's fascinating is that exile never was really overcome. Yes, the Jews were able to build a tiny temple as a second temple because the Persians gave them permission. But they remained vassals. And then when the Greeks took over, they became vassals of the Greeks. At no point was there ever a redemption of the destruction of the first temple and the exile that the Babylonians had taken the Jews into. There'd never been an actual return to Israel where there was a full restoration of sovereignty and a full restoration of the temple. The Jews had never taken power back into their own hands. For the entire period of time, from when they came back to Israel for nearly 400 years, they had never taken control of their own country. They always depended on other empires. When the Hasmoneans stood up, the Jews took control of their own destiny. And with this, a new chapter of Jewish history is opened. The Jews now are the comeback kids. This is the first time that they become the comeback nation. Before this, the Jews had been in exile, and some Jews got back, and there was a little bit of a Jewish settlement, but it was never true sovereignty. Under the Hasmoneans, true sovereignty is restored. And at this point, they are the comeback nation. And this is, I think, what Beit Shammai is trying to emphasize. Beit Shammai says, Chanukah is not about the culmination, about, oh, now we have the temple. Because after the Romans destroy it, we don't have the temple. Chanukah is not about the culmination. Now we have sovereignty. That sovereignty gets taken away. What Chanukah is about is that now a new chapter in the Jewish soul, a new chapter in our way of seeing ourselves is begun. This is the first time that we see ourselves as capable of comebacks, because this is the first time that truly people can say that the exile of the Babylonians has finally stopped. And indeed, this is a debate between Nachmanides and Don Isaac of Abravanel. But one would say that at the moment of Chanukah, that's when the Babylonian exile is truly reversed. That's when the Jews become comeback kids. And that's the lesson of Chanukah. I think about a lot of people who reflect this concept of being comeback kids. And I think about, in particular, Jews who lived in this past century, who saw the terrible destruction of the Shoah, and then saw the miraculous recreation of the State of Israel. If there was ever an era that really embodied Chanukah, it was the time period between 1933 and 1949, where we went into the depths of history and raised ourselves up to the heights of history, where we were comeback kids. And if there's one individual who best represents this value, it's Naftali Lau Lavi, who passed away last week. Naftali Lau, as many of you know, was someone who saved his younger brother Yisrael Meir Lau, who was later the chief rabbi of Israel. He saved his brother throughout the Holocaust. His brother was just a child. And Naftali Lau did everything heroic to save the life of his brother. And there is one moment towards the end of the Holocaust when Naftali thinks he's going to be taken away. And so he turns to his little brother, who's 6 at the time, or 7 at the time, and says, I want to tell you that if I don't come back and you survive, there's one place you need to go to. Say the words with me. And he goes to his little brother, he says, it's Eretz Yisrael. That's the place that a Jew can be safe. And when Naftali Lau Lavi tells his younger brother about Eretz Yisrael, he's in many ways telling the Chanukah story. A story about comebacks. Wherever you are, go back to Eretz Yisrael. Because if you go back to Eretz Yisrael, there you can rebuild. How did we know that? We know that from Chanukah. That's Beit Shammai's lesson. Chanukah isn't the culmination of a redemption. It's the beginning of a new national character. A national character that says that no matter how down we are, we can always come back. So have a wonderful Chanukah.